Number 3. Start. The Americans. Philip and Elizabeth Jennings are Soviet spies. Philip and Elizabeth Jennings are also partners in a gloriously complex and aching and loving marriage. These two facts can be reconciled. Just like The Leftovers is proof that the process of trying and failing to process grief and tragedy and not knowing what to do or even who you are can be compelling, The Americans is proof that a marriage does not have to be toxic and in constant danger of falling apart to be compelling. The biggest twist of the series is not even that they are Russian spies and also protagonists meant to be empathized with. It's that they are two characters in a bleak drama series whose marriage is, despite its difficulties, genuinely healthy and loving. It's a huge twist to them as well. Their marriage was supposed to only be for show. But over the course of the series, they truly fall for each other. Much of the drama in the exceptional 6th season of the show sees them split apart again, with Elizabeth being manipulated into helping an extremist faction that's planning a coup, and Philip openly promoting Gorbachev's ideas of glasnost and perestroika while attempting to be the successful American businessman he's always seen himself as capable of being. Neither of them succeed, and they fall back together, and their relationship becomes stronger than ever. After successfully escaping America when their covers are compromised, they start a new life together in a rapidly changing Russia. The Jenningses are not anti-heroes. That would have been the easy route to take with these characters. Certainly they are not heroes in the traditional sense. They kill, often brutally. But then again, so do a lot of our heroes, and we cheer for them. James Bond and Ethan Hunt kill. Marvel heroes wipe out swarms of unnamed CGI baddies. We justify these killings by saying they're necessary to protect safety and security. This idea is written into our DNA. It justifies our more unsavory and bellicose impulses. What, The Americans asks, is different about what Philip and Elizabeth do, except their support of the so-called evil, dark side. And unlike too many American action heroes, they actively question the morality of the orders they're given. Even Elizabeth, a relentless supporter of the cause, turns against the extremists when she realizes what they're planning. She does not want to be used. Growing up in the devastation of post-war Russia, she desperately dedicated herself to her country. She turns against the KGB not because she suddenly won over to the side of capitalism or anything vapid and propagandistic like that, but because she believes the actions of her superiors are actively undermining the interests of her nation. In Start, Philip and Elizabeth secure their position as distinct from that of mere anti-heroes by delivering news of the coup attempt to Arcady, paying the price for their wrongdoings by being separated from their children, including an absolutely gutting scene where Paige chooses to leave them and stay in America. They can then concentrate on what's always been their best attribute, their love for each other. Although the episode title, Start, is from one perspective ironic considering this is the series finale, it is also appropriate. Formally, it stands for a treaty signed between America and the USSR that contributed to the thawing of the Cold War, but more pertinently, it stands for Philip and Elizabeth's new life together. They might have been forced to let go of their kids years before they were ready, but other than that, they are not so different from any other retired empty nesters. They succeeded at raising their kids and at their career. Now they can move to the next stage of their lives and focus on each other. It's a mature, subdued ending, but it's gloriously romantic because of that, not in spite of it. They had to struggle to reach this point, not only with themselves, but also with others, culminating in a confrontation with Stan in the garage. This is the thematic coda of the series, and it's heartbreaking. Philip manages to convince Stan, who feels personally betrayed to have never uncovered their secrets before, and professionally wants nothing more than to capture or kill Russian illegals to let them escape. Though he tells a few lies, what wins Stan over is how Philip leans on the real connection they've formed since Stan moved in next door. Philip focuses on emotion, not cold logic, because it's the emotion that matters. It's the emotion that drives them. It's the emotion, the series argues, that keeps the characters from surrendering to the darkness that threatens to consume them. Ideology, whatever its merits, the show declares, cannot defeat loneliness and longing. Only personal caring can do that.
I kept doing it, telling myself it was important. Until finally I couldn't, and I stopped.
Number 2. Ozymandias, Breaking Bad. Walter White is constantly the beneficiary of positive turns of fate. Ever an arrogant megalomaniac, he attributes these positive breaks to his skill and influence, but nothing could be further from the truth. He is indeed a genius. Even Hank admits as much at the start of this episode before being killed, but he is also lucky, and it is not only his brains but also this luck which leads Jesse to refer to him as the Devil in one of the most memorable lines of this phenomenal Season 5B, which picks up speed as it races from Hank's discovery that his brother-in-law is Heisenberg to this episode, wherein Heisenberg's empire crumbles. In the very first episode of the series, Walt was terrified he was going to die or be arrested. Later, he could have been killed by Tuco, or he could have died in the desert in 4 days out, or he could have been killed by the cousins, or his cancer, or Gus. There are so many opportunities where he could have died, but he didn't. So it is appropriate Hank discovers him by pure coincidence. Walter White believes himself master of fate. He is too blinded by his pride to see that fate is master of him. The plane crash at the end of Season 2 was a celestial sign that Walter White would be doomed if he continued cooking, and that he would doom the lives of many others, but he refused to relent. He continued to bend the fabric of the world out of balance, and the world fought back. His mythical ambitions collapsed. At the start of the series, he swore he was cooking meth to provide for his family, but by the end of the series, his entire family hates him. As his family stares at him in fear and defiance, he desperately tries to convince not only them, but also himself, that there's still a family, but even he can't believe that. He steals baby Holly as he escapes, but even she rejects him, causing him to leave her behind. Finally, he is cognizant of the damage he has caused. He attempts to convince the police that Skylar was not complicit in his activities. He attempts to convince them she knows nothing. There's a small flicker of pride there, but his concern for her is genuine. Ozymandias is a fitting title. Like the king in Shelley's poem, Walter's empire has been reduced to nothing but desert ruins, and like that king, his hubris, which was once supported by grandeur and power, has become pathetic and hollow. His drug money is stolen. Everything he had is gone. Completely gone. That pride is all he has left. This is not the end of Breaking Bad, but it is the end of Heisenberg's descent into darkness. This is his nadir. He realizes the damage he has caused too late to save himself or his empire. Redemption is far beyond his reach. He knows that, so the question of whether he wants it is irrelevant. All he can do is stop lying to himself and to others. And to his credit, he manages to succeed at that in the final 2 episodes. Ozymandias is the start of that. Here, he is stripped raw. Here, he is made vulnerable. Here, his accomplishments become nothing more than a faint memory. Before we get to number 1, I have a number of honorable mentions. All of these were painful cuts to make to the list proper. They are outstanding, poignant, bittersweet episodes that stand as towering accomplishments of what television is capable of, even if they did not quite cut the top 10. Here they are. The Magic of David Copperfield 5. The Statue of Liberty disappears. The Americans. Though Season 4 of The Americans does not cohere as immaculately as Seasons 3 and 6, it has some of the all-time best episodes in the entire series. These episodes are as cathartic as they are wistful and brutally heart-shattering. The Nina and Martha arcs are resolved, the former with tragedy, the latter with a sensible triumph that soon crumbles to reveal the heartbreak beneath. But the best episode of that season is this one. It features Martha's farewell, but it focuses more on the aftermath of that farewell. A farewell which has devastated Philip, hence incurring Elizabeth's wrath. To her, there are only two options. Either he loves Martha more than her, or he should stop treating Martha like anything more than an agent. The more emotionally open Philip sees the situation quite differently, as he spent years with Martha, even marrying her. These tensions between Philip and Elizabeth eventually break into a firestorm. Philip's going to S as the flashpoint, but their argument gradually covers everything from Gregory, Elizabeth's past lover, to Philip sleeping with an old flame in Season 1. They're not as physically tired as they were in Season 2, but they are more tired emotionally, leading Gabriel to give them months off, and leading the show into a gorgeously executed time skip. For a shining moment, they start to believe everything could work out alright again. But the obvious counterpoint to this is delivered in the Paige storyline. She has to constantly pretend to be Pastor Tim's friend, and then she has to pretend at home like this assignment isn't tearing her apart. This episode would have been my number 11.
Well, I'm sorry the man you love died and you're stuck with me!
I am stuck with you because I took you back. After you slept with the woman who had your son and you lied to my face about it!
The Last Stand, The Legend of Korra. The ending of this episode, wherein Korra and Asami walk into the spirit world together, has received a lot of attention, and I'm glad for that, but this whole episode is fantastic. The final defeat of the Colossus is exhilarating. It's one of the best action sequences in a series flush with incredible action sequences, but what elevates this episode to true masterpiece status are the scenes after the defeat of the Colossus. Even after losing the grand battle, Kuvira refuses to surrender. When she fires a beam of spiritual energy, Korra not only contains it, but creates from it a new spirit portal, yet another case of Korra forming light from the darkness. The two then progress into the spirit world, and Korra uses the extraordinary empathy she has developed to convince Kuvira to stop. She sees the dictator Kuvira became, but she also sees the vulnerable, scared orphan Kuvira was. To Korra, Kuvira is not this wholly evil person, but rather a person with good intentions who was corrupted by the allure of power and control. Since the start of the season, Korra and Kuvira are paralleled. Then, this was to convey how Kuvira was stepping into the role Korra was supposed to fill, while Korra recovered from Zahir's poison. But here, these similarities serve as a conduit between the two women. They increase Korra's capacity to empathize with Kuvira, and they allow Kuvira to accept that empathy. She is convinced by Korra's words in a way that she was not convinced, could not be convinced, by brute force. It's a smart, powerful ending to a comprehensive, earned, and underappreciated character arc. It's not straightforward like Zuko's arc in Atla, but it's as earnest and poignant when viewed from a macro standpoint. It's a true maturation.
Why would you save my life? After everything I did to you? I guess I see a lot of myself in you. We are nothing alike. Yes, we are.
A Day's Work, Mad Men. The Peggy half of this episode is quite funny. It's a classic sitcom misunderstanding plot, and it's played quite well. Like all ostensibly frivolous plot lines on Mad Men, it actually reveals a lot concerning where a character is, and what they want, and what they're thinking about. After Dawn was forced out, Peggy became the beating creative soul of SC&P, but after Ted broke her heart, she became cold and shriveled, and these two aspects of her, the creativity and the coldness, mixed together into an accomplished but brutal woman. However, the reason this episode is on the list has nothing to do with Peggy. The reason this episode is on the list is the Dawn and Sally side of the episode. This is Kiernan Shipka's best performance on the show, striking a balance between betrayal, longing, and curiosity. When she was younger, she used to think of her father as an ideal, while vilifying Betty. But after she caught Dawn having an affair with the neighbor woman, then being congratulated by this woman's husband for helping get his son out of the war, she burst. She realizes the truth behind the negative comments she has heard about him. But unlike the other relationships in Dawn's life, particularly his dissolving marriage with Megan, his relationship with his daughter is not unfixable. John Hamm is always great as Draper, but what elevates his performance here is a touch of lugubrious desperation. He knows he's helpless on a multitude of fronts, but when he realizes his relationship with his daughter can be healed, he commits himself to healing it. The interactions between them begin with her catching him in a lie, as he is not in his office, and they end with him revealing the whole truth to her. Both of them gain from his honesty, a rarity in this show. She, a savvy teenager who's tired of having the truth hidden from her, wants to be treated like an adult, and he, desperate and lonely, wants someone to confide in. The episode ends with a blithe, effortless "I love you" from Sally, which blindsides Dawn, but he is comforted. In the wretched muck his life has become, he has managed to repair at least one relationship.
Happy Valentine's Day. I love you.
The Southern Raiders, Avatar: The Last Airbender. The relationship between Zuko and Katara may not have ventured into romantic territory, as many fans, myself included, would have liked, but it is still the most interesting relationship in the series, in part because it avoids easy definition. Throughout the series, it wavers from antagonism, to tenderness, to betrayal, to, finally, acceptance. The two both have that darkness inside them, but they're both afraid and ambivalent toward this darkness. They connect with each other on a deeper level than either of them can rationalize because of this. That Zuko would be the one to sympathize with Katara's desire to seek revenge is organic, gorgeous writing. They're united not in that they've endured tragedy, all the characters in this series have, but in that they are unable to move past that tragedy. They linger on it. From his own experiences, Zuko knows Katara will wrestle with her mother's death for the rest of her life unless she has the opportunity to seek revenge, so that's exactly what he gives her. He's surprised how far she goes, such as when she bloodbends, but he does not discourage her. He's her guide. He wants her to consider her own emotions. It's the very rare work about revenge that treats the subject with nuance and respect.
But I didn't forgive him. I'll never forgive him. But I am ready to forgive you.
10 of Swords, Halt and Catch Fire. This is more than I could have even considered asking for in a series finale of this intimate show. Halt is the rare show where every major character is sincerely trying to better themselves, not only professionally, but also personally. The characters fight, but that's because they have different perspectives. They make mistakes, but that's because they're flawed. There's none of the rampant anti-heroism, which dominates The Sopranos and Breaking Bad. I might believe a character is acting selfishly and myopically, but they don't, and they have a reasonable case to make, even if they're wrong down the line. It is insanely hard to write a focused, extended series in which every character consistently has a point, but this series manages to not just pull that off, but become one of the best series in the history of television because of it. Both early Joe McMillan and mid-season 3 to early season 4 Donna are villains, but while they're fueled by their ids, their rationales are more than merely liking being evil and thinking they're good at it, which is what Walter admits is his rationale in the finale of Breaking Bad. So it is appropriate that 10 of Swords depicts its characters succeeding at bettering themselves. It's a euphoric finale, but it never stops feeling grounded and satisfying. Normally, finales where everyone gets a happy ending annoy me to no end, but here it works. This isn't an attempt to hastily tie up loose ends. This is crafting fitting endings for the characters. And these endings aren't gifted to the characters, they're earned by how the characters have grown and overcome the challenges they've faced in their lives. Donna rushes the cam with an idea the show only hints at, and this moment is both heart-pounding and lyrical. Their unity is cathartic because they had to endure so much strife to regain it. Joe becomes a humanities teacher, which is both the perfect ending for his character and an ending I never would have conceived. It's a job the arrogant windbag that is Season 1 Joe would have despised, but it feels appropriate for Season 4 Joe, as he is at his best throughout the season when he mentors Gordon's tech prodigy daughter, Haley. The title refers to a tarot card Joe pulls early in the episode. The card depicts an ominous foreground, but the horizon is golden. Joe takes this to mean that life could take a turn for the negative, and that it probably will, but that it does not have to. And over the course of the episode, he and the others ensure that it doesn't.
Hey. It was a pleasure working with you at Phoenix. I loved every minute of it.
Being a Meltdown. Steins Gate. My favorite anime series of all time. Steins Gate soars because of how it handles fatalism. This is an issue long-form art dealing with time travel ought to contend with. In Life is Strange, Max continues delaying the death of Chloe, but doing so only endangers others. In Steins Gate, Otabe's continued interfering with time leads to the death of his childhood friend, Mayuri. Desperate, he rewinds time again and again and again, attempting to save her, but no matter what he does, he fails. Only when he undoes his experimentations with time does he make progress in saving Mayuri. In the process, however, he undoes the good deeds he did for his friends. Time travel is wish fulfillment, plain and simple. The best of time travel works critically analyze this. They contend with the idea that bending the rules of time to make the world better only makes it worse. But no work has ever better made a case for the futility of turning back time than Steins Gate does here, because a wide variety of positive changes need to be erased. The pain is visceral. In this episode, the most dramatic in the series, Okabe must confront the possibility of undoing one more manipulation. The very first one. The one that saved Makase's life. He eventually agrees to this, but the entire episode is doused in melancholy and despondency. In the later episodes, Okabe finds a way to save both Mayuri and Makase, but here he has to choose one or the other, and he's gone too far in his quest to save Mayuri to turn back, so he continues forward, even though that means killing his beloved.
Even if we're worlds away, know that I'm still in your heart. Okabe. Okabe. Okabe.
The Real Folk Blues Part 2, Cowboy Bebop. Spike is unable to move on. The episodic nature of this show means the characters spend time helping others, while trying and failing to collect bounties. Usually they succeed at helping others, but they can never help themselves. They don't know how. They don't take pleasure in helping others exactly, but the process of helping someone else figure out their life gives them insight into helping themselves solve their own problems. They are unable to turn this insight into anything more. This is especially true in the case of Spike, who cannot diverge from the path he sets out for himself before the beginning of the series. The facts he learns about Julia and the Syndicate and the enigmatic Sephiroth-like Vicious, the more he commits to that path. He knows from the start he's doomed, and over the course of the series he does not run from that destiny. He accepts it. He knows he won't escape from a confrontation with Vicious unscarred, but he pursues him anyway. He knows he and Julia won't have the happy ending he's always wanted, but he pursues her anyway. This is partly out of want, but it is also out of what he perceives as the lack of other options. He has to pursue this path because there's no other choice. He has failed to find another path. Yet, the series does not present his death in the finale as tragic. It doesn't necessarily approve of his actions, but it does see them as liberating. Spike has wandered the solar system for years, swirling in limbo. Only now, after everything he's endured, is he able to define himself with a choice of his own making.
Bang.
Take care of yourself. Evangelion. While I do not hate End of Evangelion, the best ending to this show is the original ending. It may have emerged out of budget cuts and compromises and a slew of other difficulties, but this surreal ending, which juxtaposes an unrelentingly simplistic art style with what amounts to a two-part, 40-plus minute philosophical lecture on the show's themes, is daring and creative. It is very close to Made in America in terms of being an astoundingly fitting, provocative ending for its series. This is a show which started out as a relatively standard, if unusually clever, giant mecha anime, before evolving into a wild, blistering critique on the idea of teenage protagonists, and of the idea of the audience projecting themselves into the main character, while becoming a vastly more bold and ambitious show. The ending should honor that instability while creating order from it, and the eerie yet uplifting ending presented here does so. The episode before this cracks Shinji open. Here he finally reaches a state of resolution. He's able to accept himself. He is able to accept that the self is defined by others and reject a world of absolute freedom, that being a world of nothing but him, while also ceasing to rely on external validation because he accepts this more audacious portrait of the self.
That's right. In the act of observing others, you may find and recognize yourself.
Your self-image is restrained by having to observe the barriers between yourself and others.
And yet, you cannot see yourself without the presence of others.
A Tale of Two Stands, Gravity Falls. While Not What He Seems provides a mastercase in how to build affecting and character-driven tension in a compressed period of time, I've always preferred the episode immediately after it, A Tale of Two Stands. This could have been a perfectly satisfactory backstory episode on Ford and Stan, but Alex Hirsch and his team managed to elevate it beyond that by injecting it with pathos and connecting it to Dipper and Mabel's relationship. Besides being hilarious, it meditates on the greater forces that made Grunkle Stan who he is. Kicked out of his house and blamed for ruining his brother's chances to attend a top-tier school, he became a salesman because he had to. The Mystery Shack was nothing more than a way for Stan to make money, while he secretly attempted to bring back his brother. Despite Stan's sleaziness and his lack of book smarts, this episode reasserts his general moral goodness. He wants nothing more than to see his brother. That's all he's ever wanted. All the hardship in his life is not cataclysmic to him if he has his brother with him. It's not unlike how Mabel feels about Dipper. But Ford wants nothing to do with his brother and blames him for everything that's gone wrong with his life, and not wrongly so. It's an expertly crafted tragedy. What makes this the best episode of Gravity Falls, however, is how it extends past the past. Mabel, who has always had more in common with Stan, wonders if she and Dipper, who is more like Ford, will end up like the elder two siblings. She stares up at the ceiling in the last shot of the episode. The anxiety and uncertainty of this normally happy-go-lucky 12-year-old are chilling.
Dipper, you don't think we'll turn out like Stan and Ford, do you?
What do you mean?
I mean, they used to be best friends, but then they got all stupid. Can you promise me you won't get stupid?
Felina, Breaking Bad. The most common criticism of the Breaking Bad finale is that Walter gets off too easy. After his life and his empire abjectly crumble in Ozymandias, he is given once more the chance to set his own course. He will never have back what he lost, but he is given the chance to write his own ending. He dies, but he dies on his terms. He reconciles to some degree with Jessie. He admits the truth of his motives to Skylar, and she, forgiving him to some extent, hides him while lying to the newly widowed Marie. He gets to free Jessie, kill a bunch of Nazis, and die surrounded by the chemistry equipment he has always adored. This is far from a terrible way to die. Walter gets what he wants. But to view Walter as undeserving of such a relatively pleasant death is an overly simplistic reading of the character. Yes, Walter White devolves from a grumbling middle-aged man to an inhumanly mythic monster of darkness over the course of the series. Downplaying his villainy misses the entire thematic thrust of the work. But Walter is not only his narrative arc, he's still a person. There are nuances to him. He is undoubtedly evil, but he is not purely so. He does not deserve the right to redeem himself, and the show does not give him that right. But he does deserve the right to take responsibility for his actions, and the show is correct in giving him that right. Everyone deserves that right. He does deserve the right to help those he cares about, and the show is correct in giving him that right. Everyone deserves that right. This is his attempt to prove that his life is not a total waste, and he does the best he can. Not bad for a meth-cooking criminal mastermind.
I was alive.
Middle ground. The Wire. Though what's great about The Wire is driven less by individual episodes than by the thematic arcs of the series as a whole, there are standout episodes in this series, and this is the best of them. It's one of the most character-driven episodes in this series, which tends to be driven by its larger scale ideas. It's haunting. The cornerstone of it is the death of Stringer Bell, the show's most interesting character. He's the gangster who's trying to be more than that. He wants to be a legitimate businessman, but he's not as adept in that role as he believed he was. This show is adamant about how different a person looks depending on the context they're viewed through. As police, for example, McNulty and Greggs are successes, but as parents and romantic partners, they're failures. Similarly, in the context of The Street, Stringer is the cool-headed intellectual, but in the context of Baltimore politics, he's nothing but a dope. He's manipulated by those who know he's naive, and who know where he's come from, and who know this is a game he does not understand. He finds himself backed into a corner. He turns on Avon, his former friend, for being unstable, and Avon turns on him, both in retribution for Stringer turning on him, and because he believes Stringer has gotten too involved in the business side of Baltimore. The last scene the two share together, on a rooftop, looking down at their old streets, is as magical and stylish as it is bittersweet. It's melancholy and mournful, but overtly and ostensibly it's joyful reminiscence. They try to recapture their past intimacy, but their different perspectives divide them again. Avon invites Stringer to dream with him. Stringer responds that they don't have to dream. Then, the next day, it's over. Stringer is dead, and Avon will never again be so central to the show or to Baltimore.
Forget about that for a while, man. Just dream with me. We ain't gotta dream no more, man.
Stingers. The Americans. How about one more Americans episode? Stingers is the episode where Paige learns the truth about what her parents do, but this does not appear to be the case until the issue is suddenly thrown in Philip and Elizabeth's faces by a defiant Paige asserting herself as a character in her own right, and not merely a tool in the battle between husband and wife. The major debate of the season is whether to bring Paige into the spy business. Philip is adamantly against the idea from the beginning, wanting to keep her safe, whereas Elizabeth, seeing that Paige desperately seeks purpose, wants to bring her into the fold, but slowly. This debate permeates every episode of the season. It's constantly referenced by Philip and Elizabeth because it's constantly on their minds. They can't forget it. It's always there when they return home. But at the start of Stingers, the issue does not appear close to being resolved, and Philip and Elizabeth occupy themselves with a more pressing mission. However, when they return home, Paige confronts them. She demands to know the truth, and they reluctantly provide her what she seeks. What follows next is relentlessly raw, as Philip and Elizabeth try their best to help Paige process this news. But she doesn't know how. It's beyond everything she expected, and she immediately wishes she didn't ask. But she can't unlearn the truth. She can't go back to the innocence of childhood. It's a burden she has to carry for the rest of the series, and not until the finale does she decide how to respond to this burden. Her fleeting belief that they might be lying drains away when she asks her mother to speak Russian, and her mother does. It's a moment that changed her life so deeply that she struggles to understand how much it changes her life. She's lost, with nothing to hold on to. It's brilliant and harsh.
I need to be alone.
And finally, the end. Here it is. Number 1. The Suitcase. Mad Men. A series like Mad Men is too thematically and narratively dense to be said to have a single core relationship, but if one were to pick a single core relationship, it would have to be Dawn and Peggy. The series opens with Peggy starting work as a secretary, and Don at the very pinnacle of the advertising game. But he chooses to help Peggy, rather than offering help to Pete, who desperately wants his approval. Pete believes he and Don are very similar, but he's wrong. Pete has had everything handed to him, but Peggy, like Don, has not, and that's why he's drawn to her. He lifts her up, but he refuses to treat her as a complete equal because of that. Not until his life has completely fallen apart does he accept her on her terms, not his. Their relationship changes and shifts as it threads through the entire series, evolving and drifting through multiple stages. But the single most important point in that relationship is the suitcase. Above all, this episode succeeds because it is lucid and intimate. Though it starts with the employees of Sterling Cooper betting on the Allie Liston fight, it progresses into a startlingly powerful episode of television that breaks down the boundaries between Don and Peggy until the layers of professionalism are gone and they are left staring intently at each other's souls. Its innocuous beginning increases its power. Mad Men is a unique television series in that it can change course mid-episode without feeling in the least contrived. This doesn't always work, but when it works, its success feels remarkable, almost preternatural, and it never works better than here. Don and Peggy do not plan to have this intimate series of bonding moments that teaches each more about the other than they knew existed. It's pure chance. Peggy can't escape from the office, so she is forced to stay with Don and work on their suitcase pitch. And their interactions start as negative. They scream at each other, with Don refusing to display sympathy for Peggy's plight. But their argument makes them raw. It brings their gooey vulnerabilities to the surface, preparing them for the conversations to follow. Don ultimately apologizes and begs for her to return because he has no one and he does not want to be alone. And Peggy ultimately agrees to stay because she does not want to leave work. As a working woman in the 60s, she does not know how to handle her romantic relationships because there's no set plan. She's a new kind of person. And because of this, her romantic partners don't understand her and can't help her deal with these relationships. However, she does understand work. And through their conversations, she really begins to understand Dawn, and she commits to what she understands. They leave the office and go to a restaurant, then a bar, then return to the office, all while peeling back the layers the other uses for protection and seeing deeper into who the other really is. Only then does Don reveal to Peggy what he's been trying to ignore himself. This episode takes place against the backdrop of Anna's death. When Don receives a phone call from California, he knows this is the news he's going to receive, and because of this, he chooses not to answer the phone. He's not ready to face the truth. Only when he knows he has someone else to rely on, someone else who knows him deeply, that being Peggy, does he accept what has happened. Peggy has always been on the edge of his life. This episode, he relents and lets her into the center. He lets her see him in all his weaknesses and sorrows. At the end of the episode, she asks him if she should leave his door open or closed. He says open. This night changes everything between them. If Don wanted to, he could have used this foundation to completely change, but he can't bring himself to do that. Season 4 ends in defeat and second marriage for him. The happiness he wins is shallow, but that does not mean this episode doesn't matter. It is the defining episode of the defining relationship of the series. The two of them are more connected than ever before. This means they can understand each other more deeply, but it also means they can hurt each other more deeply, which they do. However, even without considering the rest of the series, this episode resonates deeper than any other. It changes and opens a relationship more thoroughly and creatively and poignantly than any other episode I've seen. It's the best 40-odd minutes of anything I've ever seen. This episode has accrued a storm of critical buzz, but it's still underrated. No amount of compliments can properly convey the majesty of this episode. It's an episode so sublime, I forget it's even real sometimes, and think it's just a dream of mine.
The only person in the world who really knew me.
That's not true.
Thank you very much for watching this. Please discourage me from ever doing anything this enormous ever again. I wanted it to be shorter, but if I cut anything, it would not be thorough enough to give these episodes the respect and analysis they deserve. Anyway, donate to my Patreon if you liked what you saw today, and don't forget to like and comment and subscribe, all that visual stuff. Adios, comrades!